in a cornfield, where at that time there was a man named John Kamkwamba suddenly fell and died. John! He was buried with the traditional funeral process.
Farmed by John.
He left his children. His eldest son was named Jeremiah and his younger brother was named Chiwetel Kamkwamba. At home, a Chiwetel son named William is repairing a neighbor's radio. There they used to use the radio to find out the weather forecast, which was useful for agriculture. William is a child who is creative and good at repairing electronic items by himself. He also has a sister named Annie. Then he was ordered by his father to repair the roof of their house. From a distance, he saw the owner of the radio coming towards his house. He wanted to pick up the radio that William was repairing, but William says the radio can't be repaired. Finished bathing, he saw the new school clothes on his bed. Then he put it on and ran out to his father and mother very happy, because today was his first day of school. He went to school and met his friend named Gilbert. In another place, Chiwetel is seen working as a porter. Meanwhile, Chiwetel's wife named Agnes and his daughter work in the farm barn, and that's how they meet their daily expenses. They also hope that Annie can go to college to change their lives. William, who is doing activities at a school, suddenly it rains. It bodes well for the people there. In the class, there is already a teacher named Kamkwamba. He will be William's homeroom teacher, and also became a science teacher in the class. He gives a message from Annie to Kamkwamba. Kamkwamba then told William's father to pay his school fees immediately. When he got home, he immediately studied for the exam tomorrow. However, due to the lack of lighting, he had a hard time studying. Then his mother came and asked him to help his father grow corn. The next day, the exam started and William succeeded in the exam. After school, William and Gilbert went to a junkyard. There they looked for reusable items and he found a battery. Arriving at Gilbert's house, the residents were gathering because there was an investor who would buy their land. Gilbert's father, who became the traditional leader there, refused their wishes, because if the trees are cut down, it will cause their area to be flooded. Jeremiah suddenly stood up and said he was willing to sign the contract, and the rest of the community followed suit. Then Chiwetel came to Jeremiah's house and argued there. Jeremiah refuses him advice and he will sell his land anyway. The next day, William made a bird trap in order to get money. And just then he heard the sound of a mower and rushed towards the source of the sound. There he saw the trees had begun to be cut down. Then he went to his friend's house to listen to the game. At that time, suddenly the radio turned off. In the pouring rain, he ran to get the battery in his house. At that time, he told his father to immediately pay the school fees. At a friend's house, he tried to repair the broken radio with the ability he had. When they got home, they saw Kamkwamba and his sister were alone. The next day, they intend to destroy the Kamkwamba bicycle, but he couldn't do it. Then Gilbert asked him to take Kamkwamba bicycle light instead. And at that time, he saw how the lamp worked, which he felt was quite strange, by turning the bicycle pedal so that the light was on. At night, he overheard his father and mother talking about his school fees. His father said that he had not been able to pay his school fees. William was very saddened by what he had just heard. The next day, the students who had not paid their tuition, including William, were gathered in one room, then asked to go home and be able to return to study after paying off the school fees. At that moment, it rained heavily and flooded the cornfields of Chiwetel, so they failed to harvest. The next day, William and Chiwetel went to a tobacco factory to meet his father's old friend named Daniel. He hoped that Daniel could help him contact the investors so they would be willing to resell the unfallen trees they had bought, so that the tree can withstand flooding in their land. Daniel told him to look for another business, because the soil conditions in their place were too dry. In times of drought and rain, it will be difficult to farm. He said to prepare for the upcoming dry season because it was certain that it would be a long famine. On the next day, it was seen that their plants were not growing well because the land was very dry and there was no water. Chiwetel then told the incident to the traditional leader. There he wants the traditional leader to convey the community's complaints to the president, who will visit their area. On the other hand, William returned to find a dead battery in the junkyard. He thought it could be used to repair the water pump, but he needed a dynamo to revive the dead battery. The next day, William, who still wanted to study, went to school and entered secretly so that the teachers and principal would not know, because it is known he has not paid his school fees. When the lesson was over, he asked Kamkwamba about the light on his bicycle when he was rocked. After Kamkwamba explained, then he asked where he could find the dynamo for the dead battery. He then says to just study it in library. There he can find books on the use of energy for dynamos. However, because he had not paid school fees, he could not enter the library. Then he told Kajigunda that he would keep his relationship with his sister a secret, as long as he could enter the library. He was finally able to get into the library with the help of the Kajigunda.
Does Mr. Ofesi know about it?
Good luck.
He then found a book and studied ways to use electrical energy. When the president visited their place, the traditional leader gave a speech. At first, he praised the current government. Then he began to complain about the flooding that is happening in their current place. He hoped that the government would pay more attention to their area, because now the government comes only to campaign and does not pay attention to their lives. This sparked a debate between the president and his assistants. Then the president asked his assistant to bring the traditional leader backstage. There, the traditional leader was beaten by the president's assistants. The incident made the health condition of the traditional leader deteriorate. Day after day changed. When the harvest season arrives, the results of their corn gardens are far from expectations. Even for consumption, it will only last 60 days. While the next harvest is still waiting for another year, it forced Chiwetel to sell whatever he could, so that he and his family can survive. He even had to sell the roof of their house and replace it with straw to meet the needs of his family. Arriving at the market, the prices of goods began to rise, and on the radio came the news that the government was denying the current food crisis. And they are even busy taking care of securing the upcoming election victory. Hearing this, Chiwetel went to the city to support the opposition groups and against the government with some citizens who are also going there. They left aiming to demonstrate that the government recognizes the current food crisis. The next day, William went to the library to read a book to learn how to generate energy to charge a battery, so that it can be used to pump water. It aims so that they can get water supplies during the dry season and can harvest twice during the dry season. At another place, Kajigunda tries to convince Ani and asks her to leave the village and marry with him. The next day, William wants to ask Kajigunda about the dynamo to use. But the teacher who taught at that time was the principal of the school named Mr. Afisi. He replaced Kajigunda, who didn't come to class that day. Mr. Afisi saw William, who was there, immediately kicked him out of the school. William, who had just arrived home, told his mother that he had been expelled from school. At that moment, his mother saw the residents running to the government truck, which was selling wheat at a very cheap price. Immediately, his mother asked him to go buy grain from the government truck. Elsewhere, Chiwetel is on his way to the city. On the way, he sees the condition of the people starting to panic and trigger chaos. He saw people attacking each other for food. He remembered his family and asked the driver to return to the village. At home, Ani intends to go with Kajigunda, but her mother tries to stop her. Until suddenly a man entered the house and took their food. Then they rushed out of the house and saw that some people had looted the corn harvest in their barn. At another place, William is waiting for a government truck that sells wheat cheaply. But the situation there looks very chaotic because of the increasing number of people to buy wheat at such low prices. He tried to sneak into the barn full of grain. Outside the warehouse, the situation is getting more and more chaotic. He was trapped in the warehouse and tried to find a way out by breaking through the walls of the warehouse. Finally, he got home with the wheat he got. Apparently still not enough for their daily food supply. So Chiwetel decided to ration their food by eating only one meal a day. At that time, Ani began to blame her father. Her mother then reprimanded her. Day after day, they lived as usual, even though they only ate once a day. At night, William went to his sister and told her to ask Kajigunda for a dynamo. The next day, after picking up firewood, William saw his mother and father crying over the departure of Ani, who had left them and went with Kajigunda. He then entered the room and saw the dynamo of Kajigunda bicycle that his sister had left before she left. Then Chiwetel and his family went to the principal and asked Mr. Afisi for the address of Kajigunda. He says if he doesn't know where Kajigunda is at this time, and schools will be temporarily closed due to the current state of the economic crisis. This causes teachers and students to be sent home. At that time, William asked Mr. Afisi's for permission to enter the school library. There he took a book and a dynamo, then began to experiment from the books he had studied, helped by some of his friends. He finally succeeded in creating a windmill that could turn on a radio without using batteries. They began to eagerly look for used goods to make a bigger windmill. At another place, William approached his father and showed him his creation. Then he wants to ask his father's bicycle to be used to make a bigger windmill. But his father refused and instead asked him to give up all his desires. The next day, William and Gilbert started farming again from morning to evening. There they start to feel bored. He started thinking about taking his father's bike. He and his friends went to the house to ask for his father's bicycle and again explained their good cause. But his father refused. William did not give up and then gathered the tools needed to make a bigger windmill. On the other hand, his wife says that he should give his son a chance so that he can create their wish. Then he went to his son and there William said that he needed help from his father. Chiwetel started to support William to create his son's wish and sacrificed his bicycle. He was helped by the residents and William began to give his idea to make a big windmill. With their ideas and hard work, they finally managed to turn on a bigger windmill that produces electrical energy that makes the pump work. When the residents were busy clearing the land, suddenly the water started flowing. Chiwetel, who saw this, immediately hugged his son tightly and he was proud of William. Time keeps running. Now agricultural lands have received water. The plants are starting to grow well and a new hope has been created for a better life. In another place, the traditional leader eventually died. With his findings, William gave new hope to his village.